Hey everyone, this is Adrius with Forestry Feast Gear, and today I'm going to show you the basic walkthrough of how I build a simple tavern tankard. I appreciate your feedback and look forward to keep making tankards for you all. So my first step is always going to be to pick out the right wood. For this we're going to be using leopard wood along with some marble wood. So next thing we're going to do is resaw them on the bandsaw, and I'm going to adjust down the guard and cut them down to just over a quarter inch so that when I sand them and finish them and take off all the tool marks, they'll be at a quarter of an inch thick. You want to be careful to make sure that everything's at 90 degrees and that you're cutting real nice and clean on that so that you have what you're looking for. Then I'm going to run them through the drum sander, and basically I line the drum sander up to the right thickness and I take them through several passes. I'm only doing one side of them because I really only need one side to be perfectly smooth. If the other side is rough and has the jagged cut marks, it doesn't really matter to me. One side, the outside of the mug, needs to be perfectly smooth. So that's 100 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to go through a few passes. So for slat length, you're going to want to be consistent in all of them, and for that I use about 7.5 inches. I calculate that based off of the jig that I'm going to show you guys in a minute. But 7.5 inches, when it's all trimmed and done and sanded, gets you about a 20-ounce mug. So next I'm going to mark out how long I want them to be, set up a stop, and then I'm going to repeat my cuts so that I have at least 8 slats. I'm actually doing 8 of each kind of wood here so that I have 16 slats and can put together 2 mugs in case something goes wrong later. So for the next step, we need to make a jig for cutting our slats with the taper. These are the 2 jigs that I end up using, and they're just simple pine. Here you can see that it has a 3-degree taper on the first one and a 6-degree going the opposite way on the other one. That compensates for it and gives you 2 3-degree sides. So you want to set the blade bevel at an angle of 22.5 here, and that's because we want 8 sides. We're going to take 360 divided by 8 divided by 2, and that's what each side of your angle is going to end up being here. And then feed them through. So now that one side taper is done, we're going to set the guard up and switch to our other jig and cut the other side. So this is actually a 6-degree so that it can accommodate the other 3-degree taper. That leaves me with both sides beveled and ready to make octagons out of them. So the glue up's pretty important. It takes quite a bit of time. I'm using frog tape, which is a form of painter's tape that sticks well and rips well, to line up my pieces very tightly against each other. That way that once I fold them in, it will form that octagon. So you're going to do that, and then you're going to put on your glue. And the glue is going to be Tight Bond 3 because it's waterproof. I then use acid brushes from Harbor Freight to paint into those gaps and close up my whole thing. Then I can use the jig for cutting and trimming the edges. The reason I wrap it in the electrical tape is because it's vinyl, it's stretchy, and it holds everything together while it's gluing. So here I fit the jig in and put it onto the jig, and we're just going to trim the end. When you do the glue ups, the pieces aren't going to end up 100% perfect, so you want to do this step to trim off any excess there so that it meets up and makes a real nice perpendicular flat piece. That'll allow us to run it through the sander real quick, and all I'm doing is trying to sand it down so that it's real flat. It only takes a little bit of a touch at this point to make sure that everything's lined up real nice. So for the bottom glue up, I'm going to use a 3/8 piece of hardwood that I have laying around. I like to buy these thin sheets of it, and then I can use those as the bottoms. Cut them on any of my saws really. And then you just put some Type Bond 3 because it's waterproof. We're going to use more of that and use the brush, and we'll get this laid out on there. It's definitely important to make sure you clamp it down real tight, and here I'm going to use 4 clamps. These are just cheap Harbor Freight clamps that I happen to like. I like the squeeze clamps the best because they seem to work the fastest and they hold pretty well. So once it's all clamped up, you're going to wipe off the excess glue and then let it sit for a while. With it glued up, we'll take it back to the bandsaw, get the guard up, and we're just going to cut off the excess. Basically, I allow the blade to follow the line of the mug and just trim off all of the pieces so that it's flush with the edges. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to make sure you don't cut into the slats at all. Once the bottom's done, we're going to use the drum sander there to clean up the inside. It's just attached to a drill press, and what I'm doing is grinding out any excess glue and any burrs in the wood that might be sticking out. Get that real nice and smooth, and then make sure you bang out all of the dust so that it's perfectly clean for the... So for the resin step, I use Entropy resins. I get them at my local woodworking shop, and it's a 2-to-1 part mix. FDA approved to be used on food surfaces, and once they harden and cure fully, it's watertight and puts basically like a resin layer on the inside of the mug. So I mix it up real well. I use black mica powder in there to make it a little bit darker. It kind of hides the wood and any imperfections you have on the inside and classes it up. You can do this with brighter colors or glitter I've done in the past, and I just paint it on with a paintbrush, real thick layer. You want to make sure you get it in the grooves of every joint so that it fully seals those joints and also strengthens them. This is what prevents the mug from falling apart if it falls or breaks or anything like that, and stops it from really breaking. It also keeps it watertight. When I'm done painting the inside, I usually pour about 1/4 of an inch into the bottom of the mug, and that helps bottom that joint right at the bottom where the floor of the mug meets the sidewalls. See me swirling it around there. So something to note about resins, these are the 3 resins I tend to use. Entropy resins, West Systems, and Alumite. You should note that you want a slow cure resin, something that's going to take hours to cure rather than minutes, because the times that I have tried the ones that only cure for several minutes, the bubbles from them totally destroy the finish at the inside of the mug and don't hold watertight. So you're going to want to find something like this that takes 8 to 12 hours to cure, and then even then you're going to really want to let it sit so that you can make sure it's fully cured, and you're going to want to wait the full length of time it has on the box for it to be completely cured before you even consider drinking out of it, because in that time chemicals are going to off gas, and it's important to make sure for health and safety reasons that you make sure that your resin is food safe. Don't try to cut corners here. You get what you pay for. The Entropy resins in the West System, one bottle usually runs about $100 for the hardener and the regular stuff together. The Alumite there at the bottom works. I usually have to do 3 or 4 coats of it to make it work, but if you're just making one mug for yourself, that'll get the job done, and is usually like 20 bucks on Amazon. So I apologize because moving forward from here, I screwed up my camera angle and flipped the camera the wrong way. But we're going to start the long process of getting all of our sanding done. This is 40 grit on the belt sander to try and get off any rough cut marks or any of the resin epoxy from the inside that might have dripped over. So once that's done, I'm going to put my bevel edges around it by just running it over a round over bit on my router table. That's going to be the inside lip, the outside lip, and then I switch over and I do the bottom edge just to kind of give it a nicer feel in the hand and make it a little smoother. Thanks to our fancy camera magic, we can skip over using the orbital sander to get us up to 320 grit. Next is the handle, and I tend to use scrap cutoffs so I don't waste. For the main grip of the handle, what we're going to do is cut this piece off at a 75-degree angle so that it has an outward angle on both sides. That's just a look that I kind of like and do with a lot of different pieces. And when it comes out, you end up with a hand-sized grip about that big that bevels inwards. So for my connectors, I'm going to use 2 pieces of scrap slat that are just cut down clean before they're ever tapered or anything. And I'm just going to put some wood glue down, and I'm using 43 gauge pin nails to pin this into place. So I just kind of hold it in place, hit it with the pin nails, and we're good to go. Then I'm going to flip it and repeat for the other side. Now we go back to the aggressive grit and just give it a little bit of a taper, clean it up, and then make sure that the pieces that are forward are flat. And now I use a 2-part 5-minute epoxy just to firm up the handle and put it on. So I'm just going to put it on and clamp it down so that it holds. It's important not to over clamp or you'll squeeze out all the epoxy. Leave it about 20 minutes to dry, and once it's done, back to sanding off any residue or squeeze out, and just cleaning up any blemishes you missed. It even includes a little bit of hand sanding with 220 grit just around those edges to get a nice clean handle. And now here's the best part of the whole project. I'm going to use some Danish oil on the outside to get a very nice finish. Really makes the grain pop and shows off the beauty of the wood. This is what I call my money shot. It's really where you see the whole project come together and look beautiful, and there's no better moment on any project. I just paint it on real heavy, let it sit and dry for a while, and then I go back and wipe off any excess residue that might be there. Finally, I rub on a paste mix that is equal parts mineral oil, food grade mineral oil, and beeswax. And I just rub that into the wood real well. A little hard to see here. It kind of gives it an outer waxy coating that's more protective and makes the mug last a lot longer. It also helps repel water so it doesn't soak into the outside of the wood, stabilizes the wood quite a bit. And without further ado, we have the finished product. I hope that you get a better idea now of how Forestry Feast Gear makes its mugs and how they come together. You can see them when events finally start back up, being sold at Knights and Vessels, at Ragnarok and Olympics, or through our store at etsy.com/shop/Forestry Feast Gear. Also, for those of you that have stayed this long, from now until December 15th, 2020, if you purchase a custom mug from me, I will throw in a standard stock Pint Tankard made out of domestic wood for free. So please get your Christmas gifts now through me. This is Adrius with Forestry Feast Gear. Thank you.